Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Podcast Assemble, the show where you come for your rambling, geeky download. My name's Tommy, and I'm delighted, as always, to be joined by my friend and co-host from across the pond, it's DL.
What up, dude?
What up, DL? How are you, mate?
I'm good. I'm very, very good.
Very
So
good.
So good.
Well, we're currently in the future, right? We're in a time machine. We've come all the way to the future.
The joke is still strong.
It's still strong.
Is it? I don't know.
Once again, you're off gallivanting the world.
That's what I do.
That's what you do.
What I
We are
do.
still in the same room at this point, so we're recording a preemptive episode, shall we say?
Yeah, I think it's like 2 weeks early.
2 weeks.
Maybe 3. I guess it depends when you want to edit
guess
it and
we'll-
release it.
We'll see when it goes out.
Whenever
We'll
you have
see when it
time,
goes
I
out.
guess it'll
Look,
pop out. On
We're all
the
about that
feed.
content.
We are.
I'm all about that bass, about that content. That's terrible. I can't.
What was that?
Let's not carry on with that,
Yeah,
okay?
I don't know.
Right.
Okay.
So you're just soaking up the sun rays and sitting before you fly out. Where are you heading?
Yeah, the sun rays. I'm headed to the north woods of Wisconsin.
Ooh,
That's just south of Canada. Moose country,
Moose Country.
apparently.
Okay.
Then from there, I'm going to Brussels in Belgium.
Brussels.
Then I'm taking a quick gander
You
over
really
to
enunciated that.
the middle of France somewhere. Lyon, but not Lyon. Somewhere in the middle of France for a wedding.
Helpful.
Doing a bit, it's like the countryside.
Nice.
Gallivanting over to Normandy to pay my respects. I want to kind of see all that stuff. you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Omaha Beach and all that crazy stuff. And then I'm doing back to Brussels, then to Italy. Doing
Seems like you don't really know where you're going.
Rome and Positano. I do, but I don't know. It's like
Man, it sounds
one thing
amazing.
after the next,
I'm
right?
excited for you.
Yeah, it should be good.
In the future, not right now. Right
Yeah.
now, you're sat in
When
the
I
room with
actually
me,
go,
so it can't be that
It will
exciting.
be very, very exciting.
So what we're doing is recording a couple of preemptive episodes. You might have already heard one, depending on which one we recorded and released first. Who knows? This is an episode which we are going to talk about an exciting main topic. DL, do you want to preface the main topic?
Yeah, I mean, with the release of the new House of the Dragon series
Upcoming.
and I think they had like a new poster come out or something.
They did. They sure
Something like
did.
that,
We talked about this on an episode that's in the past.
Did we?
I think so.
Well, there you go. I thought we just talked about the trailer, but apparently I talked about the poster as
No,
well.
it was in one we haven't actually recorded yet.
Oh yes. You're inceptioning me.
Oh,
bro.
total inception right now for podcasting.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about shows that tried to be Game of Thrones but couldn't. Every network had like a Game of Thrones killer, right? And which, by the way, like
The next Game of Thrones.
yeah, like why?
Well, I guess it's a thing, isn't it? Like, I don't know how much you know about soccer, but now in soccer, if there is a world-class player, you've probably heard of the likes of Messi or Ronaldo.
Yes.
But whenever there is one of these players who is the GOAT, players are always coming through and they're always compared to being the next Messi or the next this. It's like, God, let him be their own thing, which is actually something a lot of these shows suffer from.
Yeah. I think the ones I picked suffer from a lot of things. Well, at least one of them, to be fair. Actually, one of them's pretty good. But yeah,
I guess we'll talk about it. But Game of Thrones was, from my perspective, right? And you tell me, because you're the...
Just why did you like Game of
You're
Thrones?
the-
We're going to preface that. Why did you like it?
We'll get into that, but you're the real aficionado on Game of Thrones. But from my perspective, it's real lightning in a bottle, right? It came from humble beginnings, but it combined like a stellar cast, flecked with some serious talent. But like it had just engrossing characters. But it was all combined to become compulsive watching. It wasn't just Lord of the Rings with sex and dragons, which is what it was pitched to me as when I was back working in Manchester, and I was like, why the fuck would I want to watch that?
I think it's actually very different than Lord of the Rings in a lot of ways.
Oh, same, but that's the point I'm making.
There are
like,
some good similarities, but yeah.
because it's a fantasy based on some novels. People were like, "It's Lord of the Rings." It's like it's really not. And well, let's say since it's diverse. Let's say since it's divisive ending.
Divisive.
Let's say that every man, his dog, and network have been frantically trying to find the next Game of Thrones.
Yes.
And even HBO, as you mentioned, they've had what? They've got two prequels in the works, a sequel potentially with Jon Snow. Everyone's trying to recapture that lightning. So we're going to talk about a few series maybe that tried and
didn't.
maybe didn't.
But that doesn't mean they weren't. Some of them good in their own right, but they weren't. And I guess like that's okay. You gotta aim for the best.
Gotta shoot for the stars, man.
To be the best, you gotta aim for the best.
That's it. And quick shout out before we start to an episode we did roughly 15 episodes ago on a show called Shadow and Bone from Netflix, which was objectively bad.
True, but I will watch the second season.
Oh, really? I will not.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, all right. But that had a very similar vibe, and a lot of people were calling it, it's the next Game of Thrones, when it clearly fucking
Yeah, but even
wasn't.
like those books aren't even as good as Game of Thrones. So like, duh, it's not.
The things we're going to talk about are a little bit different. So what we're going to do is we've both picked a couple of series we've both at least perused.
I would say one of them I perused heavier than the other.
Yeah, that's
But
fine.
we will, there was some heavy petting for one and some light handsiness.
little bit of hands in it.
Yeah, just rounding first as opposed to,
Well, I'm going to be frank with you.
Yes.
I didn't get past the first few episodes of the ones I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
But
you know a lot about them.
I will. I do, and I've read the book series of a couple of the books from one of them, and I'll explain why I didn't like the TV show.
Okay.
To continue.
Random aside, just
Please.
because it was in my head as you were saying that, and I needed to get it out. Sometimes that happens. What is first base? And is it the same in England?
I'm sure it's changed in the years.
And is it this? Well, when you were talking in bases,
You talk bases.
I was going to say, do you even do this?
I never said the word base. That was all you,
See,
baby.
it was never like, oh, we rounded second.
I think.
Did you know the phrase?
I think in the UK it's just French kissing.
The metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay. So is this
Right?
French kissing? I think so too. That's what I was saying. So what is second?
Heavy petting, as you were talking about a moment ago.
Okay, so boob grab is like approaching second.
Well, I mean, it depends on it depends on
chest
who you're with.
Why does that depend on who you're with?
Well, I mean,
Should be
I
objective.
don't personally have boobs. I don't know about you.
You have
but-
boobs.
You know,
No, I'm just kidding.
a lot of this is definitely going to get cut on the episode.
Yeah, why? This is across the pond chat. We're culturally
We're
disseminating
learning about
here.
each other.
Yes, I
Look,
was just curious.
Let's
Anyway,
get back to the point.
topic at hand.
What exactly drew you to Game of Thrones in the first place?
Nothing really drew me to it. To be frank, I'm trying to remember why I even watched it.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know about the books. I think
when you started.
Yeah, when I started, I was a big fan of like Entourage. This is gonna sound random. Entourage and some other HBO shows.
That is a real sidewinder.
Yeah, no. And I think like every now and again when I was back from college, I think it was like sophomore year maybe, or like after freshman year of college, I think was when it came out.
Sure.
And I was back at my dad's place, and he always whenever I was at my dad's place, it was dope because he had HBO on demand. No one else in the family
The
had
best.
it. So I would tune into all the because HBO did have like traditionally some really good shows. Like so I'd be watching
The
Sopranos and all this stuff on demand, and including Entourage. I'd rewatch that. Whatever. I was back then when I had a lot of time on my hands, nothing to do. And I remember seeing Game of Thrones, and I just watched the first episode. I was like, oh, a new show, and then it had like a bunch of advertisements about it, like on the in between when you're watching different shows on HBO.
Yeah, of
they
course.
do give you the advertisements, and I was like, that looks kind of fucking sick, and I watched it. So I don't know if anything in particular drew me to it, but what I loved about it was just how immersive it was, and like all the good-looking people, and it was just like high stakes and just good acting, well written. The first season was just really you're really thrown into this world.
Now, interesting you mention high stakes.
Yeah.
Because if you don't mind, that's a lovely segue into the first show that I'd like to
by all
talk
means.
about. So the first show I'd like to talk about is a show called The Shinara Chronicles, which is an MTV property.
Is it really?
It is, interestingly. So MTV produced this series, and it's based on the Terry Brooks novels. And why that's an interesting segue into this one is because just if you read the general overview of this, as in the synopsis, it gives you quite a different perspective on what you were saying in terms of high stakes. So listen to this. So I'm gonna bring back one of my characters from a number of episodes.
Okay.
Here's Epic Voice Guy.
Epic Voice Guy.
As stolen from the YouTube channel. Thousands of years after the humans' collapse, an elven princess Amberly, a human Eritrea, and a half-elf Will embark on a journey to prevent...
Eritrea and Will?
Exactly. To prevent a demonic army from obliterating the universe. It's like, come on, man, get your stakes in order. I feel like...
The universe isn't enough for you?
No, what I mean is it's too much. It's way too much.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. Chill out, guys. So from my perspective,
Not to mention this cheeky Khaleesi look-alike. I'm just getting some thumbnails.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Please flick through the pictures while we're talking, because I think it's a good way to get an overview of like the show. The interesting thing is that the show, I mean, in media, not so much, was never hyped as being like a Game of Thrones killer. It was never really that, but it was in the same vein, right? So it's based on a book series. It's got, a pretty big backing from a huge studio. Everyone is looking for that vibe, that sort of water cooler TV, shall we say.
Yes.
And nothing can describe my feelings towards the show more than the IMDb score being a flat 7. Like, it is
7's
just
not terrible, though.
It's not good, though. Like, it's not far off an Aquaman.
Well, that's fair. This guy is now playing the Elvis.
Oh, is it that guy?
The Will.
There you go.
Elf Will.
The Will Elf.
The Will Elf.
Will is such a random name compared to Eritrea and Amberley.
It doesn't really add up.
It doesn't vibe right. Yeah. So the other challenge I had with this show, and I admit in going back to the beginning, I only watched a couple of episodes of this because it just did not hit home with me. It had big tweeny vibes.
Yeah, tweeny.
You know what I mean?
Tweeny can ruin a movie.
Or a show. It just threw it completely. Like, it started off quite strong. And this is actually a show that's recommended to me by one of the friends of the show, actually one of my best mates from years past, Craig. And he loved it. But he's big into his fantasy novels, always has been. Mm-hmm. Big Terry Pratchett fan. Loves all of the weird shit that goes with that. Yeah, well, but it just lacks the thought-provoking nature of Game of Thrones. What it did is it throws you into this world, and I like being thrown into a world. I like minimal explanation to begin with, but it just had such a wild sort of stab at what its target audience was. It just didn't know. So some of my thoughts on this in general were that instead of having a key focus in the early days on building characters, building understanding of the world, it flew straight into the love and romance side of things.
Yuck.
That's
the best way to turn me off of a show.
100%. And unlike early Thrones, it rushed the story. So the first 2 episodes rushed through a whole portion of the books. I think I've read the first book to this like a long, long time ago. So it rushed through a whole portion of it. So these main characters can meet and they can start those tweeny vibes. Yeah. Which is the polar opposite to what a Game of Thrones did. Thrones threw characters on opposite ends of the country and just went, they'll see each other when they see each other.
Like maybe in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Like if they ever decide to go for a walk for like 15 to 12 months. It lacked, I mean, I'm saying that when the final 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, they sped things up a bit, shall we say. Yeah. So what's interesting is, in my head, I immediately likened it to those last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, which were like bang, 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 bang. They're the worst ones. They're the ones that I didn't enjoy. And this was doing all those tropey things that, made for less compelling viewing.
Fair enough. Did it have, I think one of the things that, and I'll talk about it when I get to mine, that I like about Thrones is it was slow but interesting. Yeah. You're saying this is fast but uninteresting.
Precisely.
Not a good way to be.
Precisely. And on top of that
in many areas of life.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that as well, the characters were boring. They were so wooden.
My head's in a weird place today, I guess.
That's all right. Don't
Round
worry
and
about
bases and anyway. I think that another thing I like about Thrones, and I guess maybe I'll just to have a little back and forth, strong themes. Yeah. Throughout the whole series, it had themes and motifs about power and what is power and what is a lasting, what is honor and what is lasting honor and what is stupid, naive honor. There's shades of these things, and they explored all these really interesting themes and motifs pretty consistently. Did this show have any of those?
Absolutely not. No,
that was an easy answer.
None at all. Yeah, I wanted to help you there, but no, it didn't. But I mean, and a lot of a show is it needs to get you involved in those first shows. You need to have intrigue or interest in the characters. And as I was trying to get to there before you went off on a tangent, the characters were super wooden. None of them were interesting. The main guy, Will, whiny as all hell, so annoying, and as soon as I saw that and it had the tweeny vibes and they were rushing story, I was like, am I gonna Am I gonna?
So 2 episodes was all.
Am I
it
gonna
took.
sit through this? 2 episodes was the most I got through.
Yeah, fair enough.
There is a lovely little irony in the fact that the actor who plays Gimli in the Lord of the Rings franchise actually plays the Elven King in this, which I absolutely loved. But even his story, which is supposed to be spanning like a bunch of the books, they super condensed. And in the first couple of episodes, I was like, hang on a minute, I'm sure that happens like way down the line. So it's this interesting mashup of, you know, trying to get to a point where people can, you know, vibe with the characters and see what their most of all the romantic interests are within this.
Yeah.
But not giving you enough time to breathe with them. So, like, you mentioned Game of Thrones and giving characters time. One of my favorite things is in that first season is when you have Tyrion, who is on that slow march up to the wall with Jon Snow, and it takes episode after episode, and you're like, is this ever going to end? But you get to know his character, and you see the difference between him and the rest of his family early on. But that's because it allows it to breathe, and it's not overwhelmed by shit. We need to get the teens together so they can have a romance, you know?
No, totally, and it builds on the lore through the character. This is what Game of Thrones does. Phenomenal. Well, the books and when the show's firing the show phenomenally well is it builds characters. It builds the world through the perspective of the characters in ways that inform the characters.
Absolutely.
Like, so it tells you about the feudal system, but through Jon Snow's bastard view. And so it develops his character as you learn, oh, this is how this world works. There's the firstborn is this, and the nobles, and it's feudal, but it's not completely feudal because they all report to the king. Side with him. Well, it just helps you. It helps ground, like, so you're not just like exposition, and then you're like, oh no, there's this person. No, it grounds all that in a person's view, and it builds on their, I guess, background in doing that. That's interesting. I think.
I guess some things that did have in its favor were like some of the CGI was genuinely like primo. Like it looked very stunning.
Well, that's like the best thing.
I know. Like, Jesus.
No, but fair enough.
But like there were also some good prosthetics as well. So like the main bad guy, who I only really saw once or twice in my couple of episodes of watching this, he looked like amazing. He was like some of the better looking orcs from the Lord of the Rings series, with like he had a bunch of like crazy like piercings on his head. But there was like this weird love angle with him and this like demi-human thing, which just came out of nowhere. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. This is nonsense.
What's a demi-human?
Go and watch it, mate. You can check it out.
Yeah, you're not inspiring me to.
But like when the stakes are as high as obliterating the universe and the story's based around a tweeny little romance.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's tough to see the perspective there, you know. I'm like, how is this gonna pull out far enough that I'm thinking universal?
Yeah, that was my problem with the Hunger Games. Like I was actually intrigued, and then all of a sudden it became a tweeny thing in the second book. I was like, you do realize you're still living in a dystopia.
Yeah.
Like, why are you worried about this love triangle?
Yeah, anyway, why does this matter?
Yeah.
Just enjoy yourselves, guys.
I'm looking at some of the costumes. The costumes look pretty cool. Like, that's a pretty, I don't know, that's interesting.
I didn't mind some of the costumes. Some of them were all right. Some of them were, like, real tropey.
Yeah, well.
As in, like, they jumped hard into the tropes.
Yeah,
but look, I mean, from my perspective, overall, this was just, like, a less mature tone. And it just made it really hard to connect with the characters. So that was my sort of overview of what I feel about this show. What's your first one, DL? Would you watch that? Is a question.
Well, I probably wouldn't.
Okay.
Mainly based off what you've said, but like I think that one of the things that like a lot of these fantasy authors is this author still alive?
No idea.
Well, because a lot of the authors when they first like sell their stuff, like I guess what am I trying to say here? In Game of Thrones, like he didn't sell his rights for a long time. Because many people pitched him all these like shortened ideas for movies or like a trilogy, and he knew that it wasn't going to be able to do it justice. And I think some authors just, you know, they're like, fuck it, I want the coin.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah,
and they do it, and this is what you get, right? You get a really super sped up version it picks like one character of a multitude of characters to pick as the main character, which just because you don't have all the foils. You know, you don't even get that character as fully fleshed out as they should be. So it's the classic, I think, adaptation challenge for large.
For reference, Terry Brooks, he's 78, and he's written 23 New York Times bestsellers. So
he's probably good.
He's probably all right. And the book, I remember the books from reading them being significantly better than what was presented in the show, and just having more like world building to them.
Well, that's the thing. It's hard to make these epic fantasies, like, and that's why it's pretty unique that Game of Thrones was able to do it with something as big and expansive as Jordan. And it's a credit to the showrunners to like really following him as best they could and like taking his guidance up until they ran out of material and showed their true colors.
Well, but it's interesting, but like the beginning of it's more in line with like a Lord of the Rings, right? So it's more friendly, it's warmer. Whereas like the polar opposite with the Game of Thrones opening, the first like cold open on the first Game of Thrones episode, it's literally cold where they go past the wall and you meet you see the walks of it. It's incredible. Whereas this is that opposite, that sort of Lord of the Ringsy warmer vibe, like I say. It just doesn't mesh with any mature vibes.
Fair, man.
What's your first one, DL? Which
my first
attempted to
one,
do Game of Thrones and failed.
And I don't even, I think it's a little unfair for me to say that it pretended to be Game of Thrones because it necessarily, it isn't like high fantasy, right? But
okay,
it's Vikings, and it was produced by the History Channel. It's a 2013 series, and Game of Thrones came out in 2011. And it is set in kind of that medieval period. So I guess you could say this was History Channel's attempt, maybe if you're being kind, to capitalize on the candor and
the growing love for Game of Thrones.
The zeitgeist of Game of Thrones, right? It's based on the legendary tales of Viking Ragnar Lothbrok.
Well-known guy. Know him really well.
Apparently. And it follows like a bunch of his like exploits and the warriors he surrounds himself and like I guess his crew and his family.
His crew.
It's literally a crew. They crew a boat.
That's great.
That's true. And he's what I don't know how.
Is he west side or east side?
I don't know how accurate. Well, I guess he would be north side.
The Northman part too.
I don't know how accurate some of this stuff is, but it's proclaimed that he's like the one that figured out how to like actually sail to England and all that, and I'm not actually sure if that's true. I think for the most part, what I read, this does a fairly good job of actually showing Viking culture in a good light and accurate light, and it's pretty accurate. It aired for 6 seasons. I think the final season recently,
it did,
recently finished, and I'm sure there's going to be a spin-off because there's plenty of things they could spin it off because it is quite popular.
Get Jon Snow meets Vikings.
Travis Fimmel is actually the lead. He plays Ragnar, and he is an Aussie.
He's a beautiful
Victorian
man.
actor. Yeah, he's a beautiful man. I've actually, a mate of mine actually met him. At Pelicano.
Oh, really?
The club around the way.
Oh, really?
You should go to better
Good
clubs.
Bloke?
Mate.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it's not that great.
He's earned enough money to be on better clubs than.
Well, I mean, it is nice. It's like very, very hoity-toity, but I don't enjoy it. Anyway, the real
hoity-toity. Who are you?
The beginning was really, really strong actually of this show. So like getting into like what's great about it, other than perhaps the hottest shield maiden of all shield maidens,
of course,
Lagertha. Her name isn't
Gertha.
Lagertha.
Wow.
Lagertha.
At least it's not Bertha.
Lagertha. Her name doesn't match her face.
Okay.
She's Catherine Winnick. She's strong performance from her in that role, and she actually is a reoccurring character. Spoilers for Vikings. Spoilers for Vikings. Despite eventually actually divorcing him. Well, what you could call divorcing in that culture, because he takes on new wives and she's not having it. But
classic Vikings, man. They're all about this, aren't they?
They love it.
Come on, guys.
But the beginning was super strong, man. Like, actually, this is a pretty good show as compared to the one you were talking about. I would overall say, hey, it's a winner.
What's the IMDb for it?
And I knew you were gonna ask, and I didn't actually look this up, so let me have a quick look. But the beginning is really, really interesting because you see him building his crew. He's still kind of working for this other king. 8.5.
So it's good.
Yeah, it is good. You see him kind of like working for this other king, but doing his own raids on the side, which he's not supposed to do because he's experimenting with like how to go farther with a boat. He's got like these new techniques and yada yada yada. Anyway, he gets to England, and conquers the country of Northumbria.
Northumbria?
Is that a real place?
Northumbria is a real place.
Sounds fantastic.
I don't know if it's a country.
It sounds fantastical.
It's a real place.
Northumbria. And one of the coolest parts, I won't go through the whole first season. One of the coolest parts is as a part of that, he gets a slave, and it's this Catholic slave that he brings back. And so you get this like interesting exploration of like two religions and how they influence the culture of the two places. And it almost becomes like Ragnar and this monk like philosophize against each other to try and justify each other's opinions.
It's a philosophy off.
Yes, it's a philosophy off. And you can tell that Ragnar's like a true leader and inherently curious person.
Okay.
And so he's using this to learn more about the world and learn more about the place so he can go steal more shit. But
Yeah,
also
of course.
because he's interested. You can tell it's not just because he's bloodthirsty. He's actually wants to learn more about other cultures. And so I thought that, they explored that pretty firmly.
I like
of this
that.
fish
That's
out of
interesting.
water, and this monk eventually kind of gets integrated into their society. So he goes from slave to being kind of like a member of it because Ragnar gets along with him so well, and Ragnar's rise is quite strong.
Yeah.
So he's able to do things that other people.
He is the
wouldn't.
titular Viking.
Yes, other people wouldn't have let like a slave get as high as this monk does, but because Ragnar ends up being the top dog, it works out that way. But it was a really cool, interesting exploration of, I guess, like mythos, culture, and different views on it. So it did, and
so
it does.
Interesting.
It does have strong themes. It has strong themes of like,
and it's
family.
mature content as well. Like where like the last
was
one I was
not
talking
Sweden.
about.
No.
Yeah, like in terms of the Shinara Chronicles. It's just not. It's not for our demographic, and I'm being making very sweeping statements for that.
No, it's
but I don't see it as directed towards us in terms of anything like the marketing.
Yeah, this one definitely is, and it explores like even when like he ends up getting another wife, I think in season 2, and has another kid. Like it explores like his kid's all pissed off at him, like obviously
like the
Bjorn.
like the Northmen.
Not quite.
Well, literally, if you take the uncle as the main character,
I'm just saying it wasn't. It was more like he's moody.
Okay, he doesn't want to murder everyone.
Spree.
Okay.
And it has like all sorts of things about power grabs, like the brother grabbing for power against Ragnar, who like his blood brother and warrior like mate. They end up
brother and warrior.
Yeah, they end up in conflict for power.
That's a really bad death metal band name. Blood Brothers and Warriors.
Yeah, it did well. Yeah. So it's actually quite strong, and it's got it explores strong themes of like family.
Nice.
What's important: sacrifice, heroism, bravery. Would
you recommend?
I would recommend.
Because I've seen the first episode.
I would recommend.
This seems like this is going to be a theme for me in life. I've seen the first episode. I just never really progressed with it.
So I would recommend. Now, that being said, it didn't quite match up to Game of Thrones. Right. So, why did it? Well, because at the end of the day, right, Game of Thrones is fantasy, and it's hard to like make history still feel real, but also be fictional. And I think there were certain times where they stretched that, and you kind of get taken out of it. But most importantly, it kind of, towards like season 4 or 5, it just rehashes the same struggles.
Interesting.
Like, it's like, how many times can I watch him go conquer a new place with a bigger king? And how many times can, like...
Doesn't he get captured at one point and...
I forget. It's been a while. But, like, how many times can I rewatch, like, his brother and him have this same conflict?
Sure. That is certainly one thing that Game of Thrones never really fell down on. It was always progressing in terms of its story.
Yes.
Whether it was Daenerys finally making it across... Spoilers for Game of Thrones to Westeros. You know what I mean? Like it was always progressing, and
not only that, like the plot continued to progress without becoming repetitive in Game of Thrones, but they introduced new characters.
Yeah, they did,
and they're interesting new characters that bring like a new further world building or a new element. Like there wasn't enough of that. Like eventually they do get a couple, but your core cast is pretty much the same throughout the whole thing.
So main question then for me for this, if you say it's good, you like it, you'd recommend it. Does it have the shock value of Game of Thrones in that main characters will just be wiped out?
I mean, the things about Ragnar, he has his biggest. He's the biggest Viking king. Like, he's not going to die in season 2.
For sure. But what about people around him, as in, like, the key? Like, the main character in Game of Thrones, I mean, admittedly, Jon Snow did, but was never really dead. Like, they don't die. Your Daenerys, your Tyrion, Jon Snow. Like, they're not going to be dead.
Well, I guess, like, that in hindsight, but the only one that in Game of Thrones had plot armor up until season 6 was, like, Jon Snow.
Daenerys, come on.
You didn't know that until, like I guess like the books, there's about 6 characters that all have the same amount of page time.
Oh, really?
In the show, it's really only 3. It's like Tyrion, Jon Snow, and Dany. But in the books, they all have the same page time. So it's like you don't actually know who's safe. You really don't.
Interesting.
But I would say that, like, no, this doesn't even kill anyone. People die. Like, none of those main people that I'm talking about.
That's a shame.
Yeah. Why don't you give me your second one?
Oh, I absolutely can, DL. And this, I'm not going to lie. You're going to see a similar vibe with these from me. This is another one which I watched the first 3 episodes of this one. I watched 3 and I completely gave up on it. And it's interestingly quite a new series. It only came out a year or so ago.
Okay.
And it's Amazon's The Wheel of Time.
Oh.
Now, what I'm not going to do is go too deep because I know you actually want to watch this.
I do, and I want to read the books.
Yes. Recommend reading the books? Less so the show. The show for me, so effectively this is, again, based on a beloved book series, like you say, by Robert Jordan. And it has a huge following.
Finished by Brian Sanderson.
Correct.
Who wrote all the Stormlight Archer, which I've talked about on the podcast before.
And it follows a member of a magical organization who takes 5 young people on a journey, believing that one of them might be the reincarnation of the dragon, a powerful individual who's prophesied to save the world or destroy it, right? So again, huge stakes, gonna destroy the world. Like, oh my God, too many stakes. And I think, again, this is, for me, it's a 7 on IMDb. It's getting an average score. It's not.
There was a bit of like controversy from the fans, but I thought it was more.
There's a lot, and I'm going to touch on a couple of bits here. I'm not going into too much detail outside of those first couple. It's only the first couple of episodes I'm really going to have any spoilers for at all. So, like I said, I watched a couple of episodes, and I felt the acting, the performances, it's so one-dimensional. Like these characters who are supposed to be deep and full of lore, they just have no sides to them. Mm-hmm. And you know what I'm like with characters who are one-dimensional. I'm going to go down the Daniel Radcliffe path here. They're not great, especially the 5 young characters who she takes with her. It's like, oh my days. The average CGI as well. I remember watching, so the first episode has this huge battle with big CGI monsters.
Okay.
And I can't tell you how average it is. It's like they copied and pasted the Balrog from Lord of the Rings a bunch of times.
But I like the Balrog.
No, me too.
The Balrog holds up,
but
for how old it is.
How about this then? All right, they zoomed right out, got a really pixelated version. No, they did. It's not that at all. It's not great CGI. It's very average, and they all look exactly the same. They're all copy and paste versions.
How do you pick up the Wheel of Time and not throw budget at the CGI?
Great, really good question. Well, I'm gonna touch on the making of this in a moment because it had a pretty troubled production, which is interesting. It was being created while COVID was happening, which may have really hindered a lot of things, and was really screwed up a lot for this program. Like it had a huge marketing push when it came out. I don't know about you, but when it was coming out, I saw it everywhere. Yeah. It was at bus stations.
I almost watched it because of that.
Same. Yeah. I was like, I might as well give it a fucking go then. And it just falls into a lot of the traps I was talking about. The director had to work with some serious budget constraints as well off the back of COVID, and they were limited on what they could do. So the actor playing one of the main key parts, again, great name for a fancy show, Matt. Simply just couldn't go back for 2/3 of the shooting because of COVID restrictions. So a lot of it is stunted, and there's these big swaths which don't quite fit with what goes on in the novels. And it took liberties with the source material on top of that. So you've got this fantastic, like I mentioned up top, source material which is beloved, and they changed one of the key parts of it.
I never understand that.
No. So in the books, it's very clear that this dragon reborn, who I mentioned a moment ago, it's a male character. Mm-hmm. Now, I know we're in 2022, and I know that people can make their own choices these days, but that's just how it is in this book. It could be because it's an older book, but in this they changed it to being a non-gendered pronoun. As in, how in Game of Thrones when they say the prince who is promised, but it's non-gendered, so it could be the prince or princess who was promised.
Yeah, but that's just because Valyrian doesn't have a... Yeah.
Precisely, but in this, they made a very conscious effort to change it, and it kind of felt like they were just trying to make it more ambiguous.
Like who it could be?
Exactly, out of the 5, which is, in a sense, fair enough. Like, make it more ambiguous, but I just don't like that they went out of their way to change this real key part of the story. And also, changing things from the story, it introduced characters who weren't in the books. So, for example, and this is, like I said, this isn't going into too much detail. I'm not spoiling anything for you. In the very first episode, you get introduced to one of the characters' love interests who isn't in the books at all.
Got it.
And the whole reason for her to be in this is for her to be fridged. It's for her to be killed off so she can push his... That's it.
I know.
They can push his story forward, and from my perspective, that's seriously lazy story writing, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a case of they're making it easier for themselves because they can get in a bigger audience.
Well,
it could be any of these 5 mixed peoples, or they're throwing in these fucking tropes that should be dead by now.
When you compare, like, and this is what we're doing, right? We're saying we're trying our best to compare things
Absolutely.
to Game of Thrones. So when you compare that romance and its impact to, say, I mean, like
Jaime and Cersei, your favorite, the 2 you most admire.
Why? When have I ever? When you compare it to, like, I'm just thinking about like a kind of spanner in the, like a flash in the pan romance.
John and Ygritte.
Well, that's like more. I think that's like a more full on thing. It lasts like 2 seasons, but like Rob and Talise or whatever.
Sure.
Like that's like a character that they renamed. It's not even the same character in the books, but
Sure.
like she serves a purpose.
Yes.
And like even though it's like she's not a main character, she has a bit of agency, but like not as much as most, right? Her purpose is to show like how, like, these strong themes of honor and like seeing his dad bring back a bastard. He didn't want to do that to his son, and what that, like, sometimes actually the right move like is to dishonor her. Like he had sex with her, he shouldn't have married her, and because he gives up another vow by it, and it like has all these big implications of like, oh, youth and lust, and like it explores a bunch of stuff, right? And it's not just about him, it's about like other characters that influenced him, his father's and his father's influence on him. So it has these layers to it, and it moves the plot a lot. Like, absolutely. That's very, very significant compared to what you've just described.
And I may have gone off my point a little bit when I was making. No, it's fine. No, you're right. You brought me back to the point I was trying to make there. So the interesting thing, and kind of the reason I personally felt it aped Game of Thrones, or was trying to at least, because it was adopting these mature themes. It was throwing in there like these like graphic deaths at the beginning and all this. And that just changed the whole tone of what the novels are like. The novels aren't like that. They're a lot more fancy. They're a lot more...
There's no, like, blood?
Not that there's no blood, but it's not as graphic as this is. I feel like it saw that Game of Thrones went, aha, we can do some disgusting murder shit and whatever. And it went, let's do that too, because they got good ratings off it. They got publicity off it. Whereas this didn't need it. Like, I feel like it's lazy writing, and it's alienating the fans who... literally watch the show for the things they love from the novels, and it changed too much.
Yeah, and I think like graphicness is good when it plays out like, hey, war's
bad,
and it's meant to feel bad. Like you're supposed to like when someone dies, it's not supposed to feel good when they gruesomely or their head is cut off or whatever it might be. And I think you see that in the way the characters react to it, right? Like Jon Snow. I remember there was like a really good moment in the show that I think was like unique to the show. Like I think the books haven't gotten here yet. Where in like season 5 or season 6, he's just like, I'm tired of fighting. I've done it. It sucks.
I've died
for
men
the die. I've seen like it's terrible.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and you're just like, fuck. Actually, when you think about what this motherfucker's been through, like, you would be. Well, you would be pretty shell shocked.
That reminds me of a scene when Rob has to behead one of his own men because they went against his orders, and he loses like a third, 2/3 of his army.
Yep.
Off the back of it, but doing it, he's coming away from beheading this dude, and he's like shaking because he's like, I can't believe I did that. It's like his uncle or something as well. It's like I can't.
It's like a close, like it's one of the top noble houses,
exactly,
who has lineage back to his own family.
Exactly, and what this show doesn't do, in my opinion, is any of those things. Building any of the really solid, clear tones and themes. I mean, I didn't watch enough of it to find out if they did. But if in the first 2 episodes, you're not giving me the motivation to think, these are really clear themes which are going to permeate through the whole series. And you just hit me with an hour-long CGI fest, which by the end of it was just nonsense.
Yeah.
I'm going to not watch. You know what I mean?
Fair. And I think also, like, you touched on something with, like, the whole idea of, like, the stakes of the universe. Like, Game of Thrones... There's making that the case, and there's like making it actually matter and feel relevant. 100%. And like the way Game of Thrones did something similar, right? The first thing you see is, holy shit, there's a big undead army and they are badass, and they just made quick work of these guys and they're coming. But no one else acknowledges it, which makes the threat you're like, holy shit, I'm learning about all these people. They have no idea. And not only that, they're fucking squabbling. You're like, they're fucked. Like,
what are you doing?
It raises the stakes because you're invested. You're like, why aren't you guys doing this? Oh, you don't know. Why aren't you listening? Like, it's like tragic. Whereas when you're just telling everybody, there's this big bad thing and like it's coming, and you're like, it changes the way I think you view it, right?
Absolutely.
So I think they did a really good job of that. And also we can like empathize with that as viewers because we like every day we see like, we know these big things are happening and none of us can do anything about them.
Precisely.
Or, we don't know and we just ignore or whatever it may be. Yeah.
Totally with you on that. Look, I think I've talked this one to death. The Wheel of Time for Amazon. I'd love if you went away and watched it and formed your own opinion because you might like it.
Yeah, I
it just
would be
didn't grab me the same way.
Well, especially now that people are saying the show is kind of weak, I definitely want to read the books before I.
Well, it's got a season 2, so maybe it'll get better in the second season. Why don't we then move on to your next Game of Thrones wannabe killer?
Yeah, and this one again, not really fantasy. Not really. I don't know if it's fair to call it a Game of Thrones killer, other than the fact that Netflix themselves proclaimed it to be their answer to Game of Thrones. So there you go. But it's Marco Polo, produced in 2014 by Netflix.
Okay.
You remember this one?
I do.
It was like plastered all over Netflix for months on end.
I think I've seen the first season.
There is 2. I think I don't even know if I finished the first season, but I got pretty significantly into it.
Okay.
Mainly because I am a big history buff. I like to read about history. I like historical fiction as well. So there's like that. Like I like anything that's like seeped in history. And so I was like, this could be kind of cool. And so I do remember like getting fairly deep into it, but it was a 10 episode series. Probably one of those 10 episode series that could have been like 6 episodes or 8. The way Netflix loves one of those. And it's about the Italian explorer, as you would expect, played by Lorenzo Richelmi, who, to be fair to him, I actually think he did a pretty good job as being a compelling lead, but really the series itself was just rather boring, to be quite frank. But
that's tough.
Yeah, but it clocked in at like 90 million.
Oh wow!
So to put that
remember that.
It was their most expensive show ever at the time.
Now I think it's Stranger Things.
Yeah, and I think that after that, wasn't there a show like Frontier or something with Jason Momoa? I think that might have beaten it too.
Right.
But anyway, it was 90 million. To put that in perspective, Game of Thrones first season was 60 million.
Wow,
which is still a pretty big commit.
Yeah,
but and I think the Thrones season was 10 episodes as well. Yeah,
it was.
So it's pretty much like for like. So 30% more. But really never found its footing with like either people that watched it or critics. Like it was pretty like middling reviews the whole way through, despite kind of having 2 seasons. I think they canceled it after the second season, like right after it was released. And back then, apparently, that was a rare move. Like they didn't really do that as much now.
Yeah, they usually don't get past second season.
Yeah, now it's pretty.
I'm surprised Stranger Things is still going. Actually, thinking about it.
But Stranger Things was a hit.
It's
instant
a
hit.
Serious hit.
It was an instant. Like people loved it. And it's actually set in the time of the Mongol Empire, apparently, because 80% of this shit is completely fake.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, 20% of the show is based on reality, according to a couple Mongolian history experts that I looked up before I talked about this on the show. But it covers their court politics as well as like the conflicts with the Chinese Song dynasty, so other feudal other large kingdoms.
Does the show give it enough time to really expand and get to know those cultures as well?
So yes. What I was going to get to is it actually, it's like the opposite of your first show that you described, right?
Yeah, okay.
It is slow. It's fucking too slow.
It's too slow.
And it's like just not that.
It's really hard to get that right, isn't it?
It's just not that compelling. Like the main character is interesting, and like the show is like gives you time to meet all these different people in the court, but like there's just no conflict. There's no reason for me to care about these random people in the court because also like they don't. It's not really true to anything in its history, so they can only change it so much, and like I guess there's not really any real stakes.
Isn't it so interesting that like one of the I'll keep a moment for bemoanment, if that's a word. The thing we bemoan most about a lot of shows is that it doesn't give us enough time with the characters to get to know them, to let them build. Whereas this one seems to have too much time.
I think but it also you need to have interesting characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting dynamics, and those have to be, as I said, interwoven into this world and what you've built, and like I just think that there was really one interesting character, and it was the main guy,
Marco Polo.
Yeah, and then there was a couple interesting dynamics in the court where like there was two, like a Khan and another guy was like one son was like competing with the other son, but it was it wasn't well acted, it wasn't well cast as well.
It kind of sounds like it's trying to ape a bit of the 300 Spartans in there as well, because that was very court based at times. I know everyone remembers the 300 for the abs and the fighting, but if you remember, I'd probably say a good third of that movie is court based, and them like, should we send the army? Should we not send the army? Go and see those weird guys who smoke a lot of weed and make weird decisions with naked chicks.
I forgot about that.
Well, exactly, but that's, you remember.
No, there is a lot. There is a lot of that. There is a lot of that, and there's like nudity and like all this stuff. And it would, I just think also, one of the other issues I just think it would have been cooler to see like Genghis Khan, not this. It's made after Genghis Khan's grandson.
Oh right, okay.
And his court, and actually played by Wong.
Oh really?
Wong. Yeah, he
my favorite.
He plays the Khan.
Well, all right, okay.
And like he's good, but also I'm just like, I don't really believe him as this badass conqueror.
Right.
And so that was part of the challenge. It also has another fantasy series that tried to be Game of Thrones, The Witcher. Remember that warrior mage from the end of the first season? Then he has a bigger role in the second season where he's like hooking up with the other main mage at the school. He's
Whoa,
the Indian
you just
guy.
said a lot of things.
I don't think you're.
Oh, the
attention.
guy. No, I was. No, I know who you mean.
He's got the slick back Indian hair, ponytail.
Yes.
And he.
He does. In our tray or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you mean now.
He's in this as well.
Interesting.
So it had a little tie to another Game of Thrones killer or attempted killer. But yeah, at the end it was slow. But
speaking of, if you want to hear us talk about The Witcher, we have an episode on that too.
We do, plug. And that was actually, I think our Witcher episode was pretty good. So check it out. But
if we may say so ourselves.
Yeah. Slow but uninteresting, I think. I guess because it's just a bunch of petty human conflicts. Like it's not very good. And mostly it didn't work though, I think, because fantasy is more fun than traditional history typically. Unless you really do something right, like what I think the first season of Vikings did, exploring these different historical viewpoints and religions, and like that was really interesting and compelling. They didn't really do that in this. They didn't find that thing that would ground you in the history and make you care and make it interesting. And definitely more fun than maybe Marco Polo's history, right? Like when you think about like a Viking warmonger and Marco Polo, like this to me should have been the show about Genghis Khan. And it should have been
be great.
A much cooler show about Genghis Khan and showing like how fucking ruthless and how bad of a person he was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe you ground it in the people fighting him, and it's tragic, and like you have people in his court who are like just trying to survive. Like that's an interesting story to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a political drama that made Game of Thrones tick.
Yeah, it's like a missed opportunity, I think, in that way. Where like you could have had the Horde be like the villain, the fucking Mongol Horde.
Yeah,
you see them going over the fucking mountain.
They could be the White Walkers in the background.
Exactly,
building up to.
That could have been a cool story, and I guess they just got caught up with like, oh, we need to be marketable, Marco Polo. Yeah. But it interesting fact.
I'm intrigued by that. Go on.
An interesting fact about Genghis Khan. He reduced the world's population by 10%.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Isn't he supposed to have DNA bloodlines with something like 10% of the world? Something crazy like that.
I didn't know that, but
he had so many wives,
sons.
He had so many children that he's apparently got.
And also he ruled for so long that like all those lines that have been rich and survived and passed on their genes.
Exactly.
That's pretty interesting. He apparently affected the world's greenhouse gases.
Oh my god!
Because of how many people he killed.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Well,
let's bring him back.
Incredible.
It's pretty fucking nuts. All right. Well, that was a couple of shows which tried to be Game of Thrones and failed, and why we think they failed at that. It's super interesting from my perspective that a lot of them basically picked an element from Game of Thrones and just couldn't quite get all their ducks in a line.
Yeah. I mean, for mine, they were both historical fiction, so that's part of. They're almost a different genre, but they
sit within it.
Yeah. Would you watch either of those? By the way, I never asked. Vikings or Marco Polo.
I have tried Vikings. I got a bit bored. Marco Polo, I've watched the first season, but I don't remember it, so it can't have been that good.
No, it's pretty average. Pretty average.
Well, a couple of others from random lists that I found to see if you've seen them. Last Kingdom, seen it?
I have, and actually, it was literally because I wanted to watch a Game of Thrones season. I wanted to kick. It was exactly what they wanted me to do, is what I did.
Right.
And it was actually pretty good. I never finished it. Other people have told me that it's really good as well. It's on Netflix. I think I will get around to it. It was pretty good.
I've heard it's great. I'll be watching that at some point. That's a good one to put on the list. And one called Outlander. Have you seen that?
No, but that is another one that gets really, really good ratings.
Okay.
But it's historical fiction, isn't it? I mean, sorry, like it's not actually like fantasy. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Outlander, and it's also on Netflix.
Yes, it is. It is.
And I've heard actually, there's a couple Game of Thrones actors in it. There's Edmure Tully is in it.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah.
Cool. All right,
cool, man, cool. Ladies,
cool. Bit of a Brooklyn Nine-Nine for you there. All right, well, thank you all for sticking with it. We do really appreciate it. This was a bit of a shorter episode today. And
name of your sex tape.
Oh, that was fantastic.
I had to do it.
Mad props for that. I can't say anything back. We appreciate you sticking with it. Let us know what you think. Do you have any Game of Thrones killers that failed, and why do you think they failed? We'd love to know. Or do you think that some of these shows we've talked about are better than we've given them credit for?
Or do you think Game of Thrones sucks? In which case, I don't want to hear from you.
Hit us up. We are at Podcast Assemble on Instagram or the Podcast Assemble at gmail.com. Do you want to wrap up the show, dear?
I do. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Lockie. I almost called you Loki.
Loki.
Oh,
he is a god of mischief.
You are a god of mischief.
He is mischievous.
Lachlan, thank you. And thank you, listeners. Really appreciate it. You can give us a review if you'd like, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Tommy.
Tally ho.
Tally ho.